Ahmed, in your new book, Descent into Chaos, you write these words, and I'm sure you carefully considered them because you're a thorough journalist before you wrote them. The international community's lukewarm commitment to Afghanistan after 9/11 has been matched only by its incompetence, incoherence, and conflicting strategies, all led by the United States. Go ahead and explain what the problem was, why you believe the U.S. missed the golden opportunity to deal with Osama bin Laden and al-Qaeda.
Well, Wolf, right after the war ended in 2001, frankly, the U.S. was already thinking of preparing for Iraq. It had too few troops on the ground. It was not willing to commit forces to Afghanistan because it was preparing for Iraq. It was not prepared to commit adequate funds for rebuilding the Afghan army and the police or for reconstruction. And for about 3.5 years, until 2004, the end of 2004, we had a very lackadaisical policy by the U.S. And there were differences, of course, between the U.S. and its allies over Iraq and over Afghan policy, which made the Europeans less eager to come in and commit. They did finally. NATO came in 2005. But by then, that window of opportunity which the Afghan people had given the Americans, they had welcomed the Americans. They said, you know, come in and sit here, but help us redevelop the country. That window of opportunity, which was open, I think, for about 3 years, 4 years, until the Taliban regrouped in 2003, that was lost largely because of the war in Iraq.
Peter, you mentioned earlier that you just came back from a DOD, a Defense Department-sponsored trip to Iraq. And what's the bottom line? What did you see?
Well, you know, it's pretty persuasive when you go through Fallujah and Ramadi and Basra, all places which were quite difficult places until relatively recently, and see that, you know, relative calm has been restored. But of course, you know, there's so many, the wheels can come off very easily. There are so many issues out there that haven't been resolved, provincial boundaries, hydrocarbon laws, an election that's coming up that could be a good thing or could be a bad thing depending on how it's carried out, provincial elections. But the bottom line is, you know, a very qualified optimism, I would say.
And from your perspective, we only have a couple seconds, Ahmed, what do you see in Iraq?
Well, you know, I think Iraq and Afghanistan at a very similar position, that there have been tactical gains by the US and NATO forces in parts of Afghanistan, parts of Iraq. But how do you turn those tactical gains into strategic, a winning strategy for the governments in Afghanistan and Iraq? And that connection is just, you know, is not being made because both these governments are essentially very weak.
All right, guys, we got to leave it right there.